exhale. Each time you breathe in the earth's air, the life-giving air, you breathe out a cocktail of nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, but also, and more vitally, more profoundly, the exhalation of your prana, of your animated and animating spirit, a rush of aliveness that joins the great wind of all outspiriting breaths, the ether, elixir of every living thing, every other being, that joins and streams its essence, invisible presence, through the world. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to show 205, especially those who enthusiastically lean in often. Coming to you live tonight from New England, from the salt-aired coast of Rhode Island, the springing coast, the recently and briefly eclipsed coast. Well, this is your poet, illuminator, and guiding spirit in the poetosphere, Colin Goedecke, a voice here and elsewhere for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically, and yes, more atmospherically. Last week's broadcast, if you missed it, was Sunny Side Up. We hatched into a world of eggs, the edible, lyrical, metaphorical, creative, symbolic, the curious to the colorful, to the flavorful, the familiar and surprising places and ways eggs show up. Well, this week, through the ether, the realm of the air, from the pure alpine air of the mountains to the bone-dry air of the desert, to the healing salt air of the ocean, that air we breathe, paint in, fly and sing through, sail and deep dive with, where we find clouds and birds, hot air balloons, and the metaphors that speak at times to great lightness of being, to expressing, to vanishing. So I've created a show for all of us of cultural commentary, poetry, quotes, anecdotes, and inquiry around this airy theme, including sharings from various listeners and followers and friends that I invited views and stories from. Well, we may do some deeper diving here and there and some higher flying, but I don't think you will need, or I will need, an oxygen tank. It will be just fine. Let's begin with some Maine coast air, hale and hearty Maine air. Owl's Head, Maine, June 2021. Maritime energy. I fill my car, my chariot, the seahorse, and the sails of myself with maritime energy, with Maine sea, wind, and marine air energy, with the sure purity of this place that, invited but never expected, flows fluidly into my body, into my consciousness, through every portal, every porthole, whenever I chance to appear, to open, and receive here. Maritime energy, always there. Eunice Tietjens, desert. There is a beauty in aridity, more primal than the beauty of the lush. A thought too easy is fertility, too soft the valleys like a maiden's blush. Give me the rock-bound desert, scrub and sage, tawny and bleak and wildly beautiful, sharp hills pared to the granite bone by age, and blue cloud shadows drifting slow and cool. For this way surely looked the ancient earth, lashed by such storms and bitten by such winds, before life clambered upward birth by birth to breathe the thin, crisp air this upland finds. And something rises in me, old and free, to meet the freedom of this dusty sea. Thank you, Eunice Tietjens, Tietjens, new poet and poem for me, and maybe for you. Santa Fe, New Mexico, September 1999. Smoke signals. Smoke signals from the southwest rise through the morning pines and yellowing aspens, sending blue clouds and signs of life into the high desert sky. Kitchell Pond, Morristown, New Jersey, April 2017. Sweet air of country spring, now flowering trees, newly cut grass, the earth breathing out again. From my exhibition of theater on paper, Behind the Curtain, the spring 2018 debut in New York City. Floating, mythic, lyric, idyllic, euphoric, to be as free as the air, as the light, as the ocean waters, floating. Through the ether, part of the title for this program. I don't know if you know much about ether, but also spelled A-E-T-H-E-R, but it was in the periodic table until the early 1900s, like 1910s. Why it was taken out is very curious, because it had always been there, and it's actually quite significant. So let me tell you a little bit about it if you don't know. This is from Wikipedia. Oh, interestingly enough that they had this in there, I thought I'd have a harder time finding something about it. According to ancient and medieval science, ether is also known as the fifth element, or quintessence, the material that fills the region of the universe beyond the terrestrial sphere. In Homeric Greek, it means, quote, pure, fresh air or clear sky. In Greek mythology, it was thought to be the pure essence that the gods breathed, filling the space where they lived. In Plato's Timaeus, speaking about air, Plato mentions that, quote, there is the most translucent kind, which is called by the name of ether. And then there was the great visionary Rudolf Steiner. In Foundations of Esotericism, he describes the ethers this way. The first element, which is finer than the air, is the one which causes it to expand, which always increases its spatial content. What expands the air in this way is warmth. It is a fine etheric substance, the first grade of ether, the warmth ether. Bodies which shine send out a form of matter, a second kind of ether, which is described as light ether. The third kind is the bearer of everything which gives form to the finest matter, the formative ether, also called the chemical ether. And the finest of all is that which constitutes life, prana, or life ether. The earth, essentially speaking, developed itself out of these four types of ether. It condensed itself, or in other words, quote, put on these ethers. It is sensitive to what is called in esoteric language the, quote, word, the, quote, cosmic word. Rudolf Steiner. So, a closer acquaintance with the ether that surrounds and affects us greatly and matter greatly, and that we both have and interact with. It exists as a catalyzer and alchemizer. Fascinating. Westerly, late February 2024, mild day, levitating. Body outstretched, on a deck, between the sky and the earth, eyes closed, senses open, suspended in a chair of no gravity, simply floating in the air of all that is, the sun, the wind, the faint-sounding wind chimes, the blanketing peace of the weightless afternoon. levitating. I'd love to share something from Annie Dillard. She was a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, from her book, The Abundance, wonderful book, narrative essays old and new. It's very down to earth, we can say, or I can tell you that, when you hear what I'm going to tell you from that. It is interesting, the debris in the air. A surprising portion of it is spider legs and bits thereof. Spider legs are flimsy, Oxford writer David Bodanis says, because they are hollow. They lack muscles, compressed air moves them. Consequently, they snap off easily and blow about. Another unexpected source of aerial detritus is tires. Eroding tires shed latex shreds at a brisk clip, say the folks who trained their microscopes on air. Farm dust joins sulfuric acid droplets from burned fossil fuels and sand from the Sahara Desert to produce pollution haze that blurs and dims the world. We inhale, quote, many hundreds of particles in each breath we take, says Bodanis. Air routinely carries intimate fragments of run, dung, carcasses, leaves and leaf hairs, coral, coal, skin, sweat, soap, silt, pollen, algae, bacteria, spores, soot, ammonia, and spit, as well as, quote, salt crystals from ocean whitecaps, dust scraped off distant mountains, micro bits of cooled magma blown from volcanoes, and carried microfragments from tropical forest fires. These things can add up. She has much more to say, but I thought you'd enjoy that or be fascinated by that, as I am. Oh, maybe I should have had some sparkling water, some mineral water that's bubbled with air. I just thought of that now. Well, that's okay. I could get some later. But I do have questions for you as we float here through the ether, through this air time. What's the most beautiful air you ever breathed? Where and when? And how was it? Did you ever have an exhilarating time being airborne? Maybe your first time. What were you flying in? And what's your visceral memory of it all? Have you ever floated through a landscape in a hot air balloon, or wanted to? I do want to. I have not done it yet. I remember one friend, a listener here, and a world traveler, frequent world traveler, who told me a story of being in the south of France with his wife in a balloon, and the balloonist brought their gondola low enough over a meadow of wildflowers to brush the tops of them. Imagine that. How lyrical is that? How romantic. Are you a lover of plein air painting? Most notably of the Impressionists like Monet. They are well known for that. I am one, a plein air man, a lover of the painting, and also Claude Monet himself I consider a kind of artistic grandfather. When I set out as a poet, I felt myself to be, and still do, a plein air poet at heart, of the open air, en plein air, since so many of my inspirations come out in the open, out in the wilds of the world, the living world, and living in the world. Yeah, where the living world around me is on the easel, and I paint vivid and vibrant experiences of, in, and with it, with words and images. How much thought do you give to air at all? Something that's usually always there when you need it for your lungs or your tires. What's an experience you had or are having of feeling lighter than air, in a wonderfully buoyant mood, maybe falling in love or being celebrated? Yeah. And when did you ever sense a moment, or more than a moment, when the air was charged? Right, as the expression goes, the air was charged. Is there anything you're up in the air about life or the world? If so, what is it? And why are you? All right, some sendings from a few listeners, and and others that I queried about the theme. This is from Catherine, nearby here over in Weekapaug, in Rhode Island. And yesterday, she said, the air, when you're skiing, it's so wonderful, so clean, so wonderfully fresh. It's true. Thank you, Catherine. It brought me back to mind of my own skiing days, when I was in my teens especially, and the bracing snow-fed air, always invigorating and refreshing, unlike other kinds of airs, very distinctive. Yeah. Well, Catherine, I hope you're probably listening. I bet you are, and I hope you sort of call yourself back to that as you're healing from your surgery. Yeah. Hats off to you, and good things. From Paul and Susan in Cape May, New Jersey. Susan, on the subject of air, nothing compares to sea air, the ocean breeze, the saltwater feel. That's one of the reasons we moved here. And Paul, my feeling about air is more perplexing. As a child, I always wondered, how does a magician vanish a coin out of thin air? Is the thin air part of the trick? Well, when I read that, I said, I'm curious about that magic act. I have an idea of how they do it, but I went to Wondercade, WONDERCADE.com. There were other sites, but went there. Here's what I found. The trick is surprisingly easy and guaranteed to wow your audiences. Here's how to pull it off in 5 simple steps. 1. Hold a coin between your thumb and fingers in your left hand with your palm facing up. 2. Slowly move your right hand over the coin, making a motion as if you're plucking the coin from the fingers in your left hand. Your right thumb should be positioned under the coin and your right fingers above it. Be sure to obscure the coin from the spectator's view completely as you do so. 3. But here's the twist. As you're closing your hand around the coin with your right hand, stealthily drop it into your left palm. The key here is to time the dropping of the coin with the grasping motion of your right hand. The timing will take some practice. 4. After you drop the coin, make it seem like you're holding it with your right hand, keeping that right hand clenched in a fist as though it's got the coin, and bring it up to your head. This focus is called misdirection and will distract the audience as you stealthily drop the coin from your left hand into your pocket or underneath the table. 5. Then open your right hand and then your left. Your spectators will think the coin is completely gone. Poof! Enjoy their astonished faces. You're a magician. Et voila. Well, or presto. Well, as with so much magic making, it hinges on the art of misdirection, really, if you think about it. Which, interestingly, to me, can be used and has been used. Maybe it is being used on a grand scale, on a global scale. Something to ponder. Thank you, Susan and Paul. Here's one from B in Rhode Island, who sent me a photo of her from 2018, which I just looking at it, I felt, wonderful just looking at it. So she's up in a wildflower-filled mountain meadow, arms outstretched to the pure Swiss Alpine air and sun. She wrote this with that. To your air theme, Switzerland. Can you possibly get any closer to rarefied air? No need for pharmaceuticals or mushrooms. The air does it for you. And the light completes the ethereal cocktail. Thank you, B. Well, having been myself in some alpine settings like the Austrian Alps and the Adirondacks, I can relate. And one more, very interesting one, came in today from Germany, from a friend over there, Chloe, a singer, an amazing singer, where she is singing with others in the medieval abbey of the mystic Hildegard of Bingen. And it's an antiphon on the theme of air, she says. Enjoy the text. We learnt this today. Music and text by Hildegard of Bingen. She said, have a beautiful broadcast, sending this from the vineyards of Rüdesheim, also known as Eibingen. Okay, she said another time she'll send the music. But she did send the score, or it's very short. It's in Latin, but I'll give you the Latin and the English. So the title is Enim, Erenim, Antiphon for Sancte Ursula. It might be Dutch, actually. At least the title looks like that. Enim volat, et cum omnibus creaturus officia sua exercet, et firmamentum eum sustinet, et in viribus istius pascitur. The air is fleet and sustains all creation. It is itself sustained by the vault of heaven and feeds on heaven's energies. Beautiful. Thank you, Chloe, and thank you, Dankeschön, Hildegard of Bingen. If you don't know about her, she's a fascinating character from the past. Well, now let's take a moment to soften, and be freely and fully, or even more so, in the moment, in the rare atmosphere of all that is. Pause. Breathe. Behold where you are, wherever you are. See all the life flowing around you. Feel all the life flowing inside you. Breathe. Pause. To just be with yourself. Be at ease with yourself. Be held simply by your body, gently by your heart, freely by the light and the air and the pure ground of the earth. Breathe here for a while with everything. Well, I had a friend come down, visit, speaking of Maine, came down from Maine, grew up there. He's in his 80s, fabulous character. And he brought a book from 1906 called How to Live Forever. And I said, I'd like to look at that. It's a book by Harry Gaze, G-A-Z-E. So I came upon this passage while he was here for a few days on breath and breathing. At least I remembered it too, to call it out for us. 1906. To increase the breathing capacity is to awaken newness of life. If one realized the immense benefits to be gained from proper breathing, one would breathe correctly all the time. The most effectual remedy for the blues is deep breathing, accompanied by optimistic suggestion. Deficient breathing is a prolific breeder of nervousness, fretfulness, and fear. The habit of right breathing fills the whole being with sunshine. Deep breathing harmonizes disturbed vibrations and gives rise to bright and inspiring thoughts. Life is a constant exchange. Each inhalation is part of the process of being born, and each exhalation is part of the process of dying. If this thought of constant birth or accession of new life, and of continuous death or elimination of old age, is fully realized, one will be in a favorable mental attitude to equalize wear and repair of the body. By cultivating correct breathing, one will soon experience a radical improvement in health, strength, and renewal of youth. Thank you, Harry Gaze. Good thoughts. Fresh air, my friends, and good breathing. Nothing but. Hale and hearty breathing. Well, do you know about breatharianism? I knew a little bit, but I needed to look up more. And breatharians, this is from yogapedia.com. What does it mean? What does it mean? It is the belief that survival without the consumption of food is possible and that prana alone can sustain one's life, also called inertia, a Latin word which means, quote, fasting. Breatharianism is to live on sunlight, the source of prana, which is considered the life force by Hindu philosophy. Not to be confused with barefootarianism. That's a whole other animal. So, in his Yoga Sutras, sage Patanjali writes that performing samyama aids the yogi to be liberated from the need to consume food for survival. This is the practice of integrating dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, and is the supreme level of mind control. It's also called prana yoga, the art of living off of it. Well, it does involve deep breathing and sun gazing, they say. Sun gazing. It's not starving, but rather replacing food with a spiritual source to sustain life. I haven't tried it or met anybody who is a breatharian, but it's intriguing. Very intriguing. Maybe you know something about it yourself. Well, let's consider the scents, the fragrances in the air. Especially like right now of spring, for those of us who are having springs happening, and how they come through the air and fill us, sometimes transport us back in time and space. Like this time for me, this was in the Lewontica Woods in Morristown, New Jersey, late April 2017. I'm 7 again. Early spring, up in the boughs of the old apple tree of my childhood, a place to float in the clouds of fresh and fragrant white blossoms, feeling my young body sing with the new-sprung bird song, with my sweet boyness, innocence, that the scent of today's tree takes me half a century back to. Isn't that wonderful when that happens? And what about the things we cast into the air? Like a ball, a fishing line, a coin, a stone. Shelter Harbor, Rhode Island, February 2022, tossing a moon. I hold a moon, a cold moonstone, moon-like stone, in my ungloved hand. Then toss it high into the air, into the sea. A stone that mirrors the moon itself, floating all cool and pale up in the day-lit sky. Tossing a moon. Ralph Pomeroy, kite flying. The kite at the end of the string in his hand holds the other end of a rope that turns as the wind jumps over it in a game played in the bright yard that lies between cloud and head. Earlier, he sent a message up its thin slope, carefully written and folded. It went, "I love you." Now he pretends he's forgotten who it is to, but wonders if he'll get an answer from anyone. Over an orchard of downed northern spies, rotting in boozy heaps by the old quarry, the lax string carries his letter, his worry. It travels like a country train, forever stopping. Anyhow, suddenly, he starts to wind in, watching and jerking the string skillfully, carefully hauling the green tissue diamond down, always away from the trees, playing the line. Then he sits down and winds like a spinner, busy with golden threads and no nonsense. And as his message slowly comes back to him, the wind sends it away, and he goes home reasonably to dinner. Thank you, Ralph Pomeroy. New one. Do you remember the when you were a kid, maybe, the Mary Poppins and the film and the songs in there, especially the one about flying a kite? I was thinking about that. That's a movie with Dick Van Dyke. I've forgotten exactly how old I was, but I was looking back at the lyrics, and Mr. Banks says, "With tuppence for paper and strings, you can have your own set of wings. With your feet on the ground, you're a bird in flight, with your fist holding tight to the string of your kite." Let's go fly a kite up to the highest height. Let's go fly a kite and send it soaring up through the atmosphere, up where the air is clear. Let's go fly a kite. That was so much fun. I was glad to remember that. Maybe you do too. Maybe it brings it back for you too. I had a poem about nuns flying, but I think it's safe than Fellini-esque flying kites. But I'll come to, because we have lots of other wonderful things I want to get to with you. But people, I know people who can fly. Let's call it that. This is one of them. This was March 2019 for Henry Hargreaves on his relaunching things that can fly, that can travel through the atmosphere or beyond it without touching the earth. Birds and hot air balloons, clouds and butterflies, zeppelins, rockets, long-tailed comets, and men like you, who have a rare and natural buoyancy, a lighter-than-air quality, that allow them to defy all usual gravity and lift off, to fly, take flight on the wings of big dreams, heart desires, and us to marvel at how such things are possible. Okay. There's another poem I'll point you to. I was thinking about the familiar furniture in the air of all shapes and sizes, clouds. Gregory Janakian, Janikian, has a poem called Clouds, which is quite nice, but it's I'm going to save that. It's a little longer and a little bit, and I just like to keep us in a certain kind of time tonight. But I'll give you one of mine, Up in the Clouds. This was written in East Hampton, New York, out on the South Fork of Long Island, September 2008. Up in the clouds. Up in the clouds, it's always sunny or starry, and below and beyond the soft edge of any cloud bank you are resting on or roaming over, there's a sound much like surf, a distant report like breakers on a long, lone beach whose volleys are muffled by sea-grassed dunes. From time to time, silver planes pierce through, heading north or west, and pilots tip a wing your way, like tipping a hat. On rare occasions, a rocket races by en route to the moon, or a hot air balloon rises slowly, serendipitously, blue Danubely, usually with men in mustaches and goggles who fuss with ropes and flames inside their floating picnic baskets as they ascend away. Best of all, it's never crowded up here. Never more than a few people watching the sunset or sunrise, when all goes pink or zinc, or lounging, reading, or daydreaming, and maybe there's an old lab chasing a tennis ball, and a gull that points like a trusty weather vane into the wind. Up in the clouds. Well, this next is inside the old once German Lutheran church, now a house, on DeGraw Street, Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, May 2016, where a glass staircase rose 50-plus feet into the atrium from the floor toward the giant skylight and sky. I was doing a poet in residency there one of several times. The glass staircase, where you float feet first in the air somewhere between earth and heaven, near a place of dreams, a place of poems, bathed in blue and yellow light, as you ascend, as you impend. There were a couple of references to vanishing into thin air, and I looked up from liveabout or liveabout.com stories of people disappearing or vanishing. It says people disappear every day. It's been estimated that as many as 10 million are reported missing each year in the U.S. alone. A small percentage of disappearances, however, for which there is no easy explanation. The fate of these people, sometimes groups, is left for us to wonder about. Did they unwittingly step into a time portal? Were they swallowed up by a rift in our three-dimensional world? Were they abducted by extraterrestrials and UFOs? These are pretty far-out suggestions, to be sure, but the circumstances of the following unexplained disappearances leave us scratching our heads in bewilderment. I'll just read you one. There was a whole number of them. The vanishing prisoner. This first account is an excellent case in point because it defies any rational explanation for one simple reason. It occurred in full view of witnesses. The year was 1815, and the location a Prussian prison at Weichselmunde. The prisoner's name was Diderici, a valet who was serving a sentence for assuming his employer's identity after he died from a stroke. It was an ordinary afternoon, and Diderici was just one in a line of prisoners all chained together, walking in the prison yard for the day's exercise. As Di Ricci walked with his prison inmates to the clanking of their shackles, he slowly began to fade, literally. His body became more and more transparent until Di Ricci disappeared altogether, and his manacles and leg irons fell empty to the ground. He disappeared into thin air and was never seen again. Mm-hmm. Well, you read it here, you heard it here, folks. How about that? Yes. Okay. We'll move along from that vanishing to other things that move through the air, from the birds to the bees, which you may be envisioning yourself, and other kinds of beautiful nature like the butterfly. This is Vanessa Cardui, the painted lady, bellissima, who flies breast high through the air with the greatest of ease, 9,300 miles and 6 generations round trip, every spring and fall, from Scandinavia and Catalonia to West Africa, and fair-windedly back, by the thousands. A tour de gentle force, to see the color, to feel the flutter, to applaud the sheer passing wonder. Well, it'll be a joy to see them again as spring and summer flow in, for sure. What about things that ascend and descend in different ways in the air when we use our imaginations? Everything can come into play when we do that. This was one such occasion, March 2004, New York City, for Sarah and Craig Durham Weiner on the arrival of their twins Kate and Abigail, entering the atmosphere. At an appointed hour, after floating for hundreds of nights together in the humming twin engine, over many unknown landscapes soon to be familiar to their feet and sight, the door to the outer world opens, and, ready to descend, they sail forth, hearts fluttering, ripcords pulled, into the embracing air, and the wild blue yonder of life and earth, and soft landings at the side of their milk-warm mother and wide, smiling father. Cheers out to them. That was, 2004 then. That was 20 years ago. I spoke of places and their particular qualities and poetries that their air has. You know, you're hearing about Switzerland and other spots, and how does mountain air make you feel? For example, this was out along the Union Pacific Rail Trail in Park City, Utah, August 2017. Iron horses. They steamed black and white through sun and snow, pulling iron-wheeled cars of coal, ore, tin-type men and women to and from this silver mining town on now-vanished rails. Though if I close my eyes for a moment as I coast down the trail, I can almost hear the wild call, smell the fire-stoked scent of the darkly shining iron horses streaming through the clear mountain air. On the island of Kea, in the Cyclades in the Aegean, Greece, Trompdoi. This sea of antiquity appears sky-like, ethereal, lighter than air, lighter than the liquid, limpid blue air of these Cyclades, separated from the heavens by one distant, indefinable layer of mist and mystery. Were you, like me, wondering about musical airs? This is from Wikipedia. Airs, song-like vocal or instrumental compositions, can also be applied to the interchangeable melodies of folk songs and ballads, a variant of the musical song form often referred to in opera cantata and oratorio as aria. Did you know that? Lute airs were first produced in the royal court of England toward the end of the 16th century. And by the 18th century, composers wrote them for instrumental ensembles without a voice. Song-like lyrical pieces, often movements in larger compositions, Bach composed two of the best known. Yes. And then we have popular songs. And there was this one, you will know this one, The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze. 19th century popular song about a flying trapeze circus performer, Jules Léotard. The lyrics were based on the phenomenal success of that trapeze artist, for whom the one-piece dancer's garment was named. The following century, the song inspired the 1934 short story, The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze by William Saroyan. And many people sang it through time, from Eddie Cantor to Burl Ives, Bing Crosby, Spike Jones, Bruce Springsteen even. And I was thinking back to my favorite visual and audio version of it is Clark Gable in a 1934 film I've seen endless times. He's in a bus full of people, and they're all singing it in the screwball comedy It Happened One Night. Do you know it? It starts out, once I was happy, but now I'm forlorn, like an old coat that is tattered and torn, left on this wide world to fret and to mourn, betrayed by a maid in her teens. The girl that I loved, she was handsome, and I tried all I knew her to please, but I could not please her, one caught her so well, like the man on the flying trapeze. Oh, he'd fly through the air with the greatest of ease, the daring young man on the flying trapeze. His movements were graceful, oh, girls he could please, and my love he purloined away. And it goes on. It's such a good song. And imagine, you've got to see, look up the scene on YouTube on the flying trapeze singing in the bus. It's just wonderful. The bus starts swaying, and everybody's just in the happiest, lighter than air mood. Absolutely wonderful. Encourage you to look that up. Also, I was thinking of the golden era of radio and characters going on air, like the Mercury Theater on the Air, as it was called, from the 1930s. And obviously we're coming over the airwaves, or I am, to you through the ether in a kind of a way, a sonic and dramatic way, maybe more so them as they did, the Mercury Theater, and that was Orson Welles was the leader of that. This is from mercurytheater.info. The finest radio drama of the 1930s was the Mercury Theater on the Air, a show featuring the acclaimed New York drama company founded by Orson Welles and John Houseman. In its brief run, it featured an impressive array of talents. The show is famous for its notorious War of the Worlds broadcast. Maybe I should do one like that and get people's hair on fire. Oh, my goodness. It first broadcast on CBS and Canadian Broadcasting in July 1938. They let it off with Dracula. Treasure Island was in it. Tale of Two Cities came. The 39 Steps, Count of Monte Cristo. And yes, The War of the Worlds. And I remembered a story that my father told when he was around, and when I was a boy, that when he was a boy, he was sitting in the kitchen with his mother, my grandmother, and they tuned into the radio, as many did, but after the show had started, saying it was just a radio play, so people, as far as they were concerned, thought it was really happening, that there was an alien invasion happening all over the world. So they were in a panic because my grandfather was out somewhere and they didn't know where he was, and they were absolutely beside themselves, wondering whether he had been, taken up by the aliens or shot down. Who knows? Yeah, imagine that. And then, what about the scene from 2001: A Space Odyssey? I was musing on that too. The airlock scene, Stanley Kubrick's classic film. The airlock scene with Dave, the astronaut, and HAL, the HAL, the HAL 9000, the computer, which wouldn't let him in when he went out to do something on the outside of the ship. And he says, "Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal. Open them." And he keeps asking them, "Hello, Hal, do you read me?" "Affirmative, Dave. I read you." "Open the bay doors, Hal." "Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that." "What's the problem?" "I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do." "What are you talking about, Hal?" "The mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it." "I don't know what you're talking about, Hal." "I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me. and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen. Dave Bowman, feigning ignorance. Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal? Dave, although you took very thorough precautions in the pod against my hearing you, I could see your lips move. All right, Hal, I'll go in through the emergency airlock. Without your space helmet, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult. Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors. Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye. Whoa, that was a moment because he almost didn't make it. He does this crazy maneuver to get back in without a helmet, and he makes it. I guess maybe that's an omen for all this artificial intelligence. Not that I believe personally that it, from what I understand, it could ever really become that intelligent. But maybe makes for good sci-fi movies. Of which there's another one. I can't tell you more about it, but it's an adaptation of this Daniel Defoe classic. It stars Adam West and a monkey. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, 1964. It's really good. Very interesting also about how he figures out how to get oxygen when he runs out in his tank. Very interesting. Okay. I was waxing poetic about balloons and stories of them that have inspired me, like the one I'm going to read you. And Zeppelins and blimps. I haven't written about them yet, but I'm going to. This fellow was an inventor and forerunner, a great and graceful balloonist. This was for Alberto Santos Dumont, the real father of aviation, the Belle Epoque aeronaut. Dandy Santos Dumont, flying his yellow silk demoiselle over the summer gold treetops of old postcard France, or steering his beloved little Brazil and its floating red banner over the fashionable hats and houses of Paris, landing on the terrace of a favorite cafe, then lifting off like a champagne bubble after lunch, with his Panama hat, high collar, and elegant mustache. Santos Dumont. Look him up. There's a wonderful little book, probably still findable. It's called Man Flies. I've given it to many people. I've read it many times. It's a marvelous book about him and the beginning of ballooning. Yeah. I was going to share some things about airmail, but I'm not going to because it talked about early airmail and homing pigeons. That was called pigeon mail. That was the first mail carried by in the air. But then it started with hot air balloons, of all things. Yeah. And then there was also the Airstream, the trailer. The first one was known as the Torpedo from Airstream.com. An avid camper who loved the outdoors, founder Walty Byam's first travel trailer experiment in the late 1920s combined a tent-like contraption with a Model T chassis, and it wasn't long before he began improving the design, and the result became what is now recognized as the first true Airstream travel trailer, the Torpedo. Featured a floor plan with plenty of, quote, walking space, a stove, sink, icebox, and storage. There was great demand. You should look up some pictures. Quite wonderful. Okay, how about this? Talking sort of things esoteric technology. But the first one is esoteric technology on the unusual side, you might say, a paranormal side maybe. Have you ever heard of the ether phone? Okay, this is from Magisterium Wiki, the Magisterium Wiki. Ether phone, also called a tornado phone. Isn't that funny? We just mentioned tornadoes. A magical method of communication. It resembles a tornado in a jar. If the person receiving a call does not have an ether phone themselves, then the caller will appear as a translucent figure. If the receiver does, then they will appear as a miniature figure inside the ether phone. It can be hung up with earth magic or with actual earth or metal. It is, however, more conventional to use magic. If one has the physical ether phone during the call, they can hang up by turning the ether phone upside down. Well, I definitely want one of these. How about you? If you can find one, send me a note. Well, someone else actually used etherphone. They combined the two words. And it was the inventor of the theremin. If you ever watched a 1950s horror movie, you've probably heard the unearthly and eerie sound of the theremin. And it was named after Leon Theremin he was a Russian, most famous. creator of the electronic instrument, which he called the etherphone, patented in 1921 and demonstrated in the Soviet Union and then Europe and the U.S. Use of it languished until the 50s, when it was used for effects and soundtracks of many, many science fiction films. I remember the sounds, some of the films, and resurgence carried on to the 60s when rock and pop music groups rediscovered it, and it goes in and out of fashion. Yeah, have you ever heard it? You know what I'm talking about. Don Bogan, Air. Air is lost time, voice of a cloud, of a ghost crowned with nimbus. Smack thin, it lingers 40 years. I thought it came from the jeweled world we'd seen, everything stuffed, urgent, glittering, alive, but it was just pleasure, blank and sure. Now what is there to sing? From speakers, the tune folds and fades and waves. Earphones drive it through your head. Air. Thank you, Don Bogan, from his collection, An Algebra. All right, coming into our last sharings and musings for this time together. This week, December 2016, Going Hungry. What happens when you don't feed your heart, your soul, the deep nourishment it needs, it deserves? The daily regimen, bread and wine, of joy, of deep loving, being deeply loved, as essential as the air you breathe, to sustain the whole of living. Going hungry, going without this way, without this bounty of milk and honey for your spirit body, flesh and blood body, is no way for anyone to be or choose, no way for you to thrive or stay vitally alive. Especially when it's all there, for the inviting, the allowing, and partaking. Don't go hungry, my friends. I'll point you to a Kenneth Rexroth poem, Air and Angels. That's 4 poems for Susan. You can find that at poetryfoundation.org. From the South Fork of Long Island, East Hampton, New York, November 2006, Our White Balloon. The burner fires in the belly of the house, fills our white balloon of sleep and dreams, allows us to float in our gondola of goose feathers and flowered sheets high enough above the earth and ocean of our waking life, where our bodies feel as free as the air. From the Yucatan coast, Mexico, February 1998, Velero, sailboat. The wind blows you back to the New World, sails inhaling the Mayan air, pulling you through the salty swells toward home. Emerson said it so well. Live in the sunshine. There's no other place I can live, wish to live, with a love, with friends, with myself. Swim in the sea. A lively a stroke and afloat in salty blue, cool green oceans, likewise in glimmer-glass seas of possibility that invite, that invoke. Drink the wild air. Drinking in all the wildness my senses 5 and 6 can find in the open, can absorb the atmospheres of. Thank you, Ralph Waldo, for your essential knowing, your urging, this inspiriting. One more from the Yucatan, February 2002, Sin Sal, without salt. You enter the hot shower at that tile-cool time of day. Clear, cleansing water washes away the salt of the day's sea and air, slips over your body like a second skin, warms you through like liquid sun after the sun has set, and before fresh clothes are put on and fruit drinks are poured and lanterns are lit for dinner. Circling back to Maine, Rockland Harbor, October 2017, where the deeps meet, where the sky and its towering clouds, falling stars, meet the ocean and its rising tides breaching whales, where the crystal blue air joins the muscle blue water, where anchor-weighing sailors and their broad sails inhale the voyaging wind, the billowing sun. And we have Shakespeare, The Tempest, and Prospero who speaks these lines. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. X marks the spot, next to last for us. Every place on the map where you go, have been, or dream of voyaging, hunting for buried treasures of the eye, the heart, with an urging, emerging spirit, is a place you mark, invisibly but indelibly, with your own precious, sometimes mysterious energy. Imprints that others, forward and backward in time, who cross them, feel a frisson of charged, changed particles, molecules, that waves underfoot, moves up through their bodies, weaves through the passing air. And last for now, till we're together again over these airwaves. This was Walking the Old Dodge Estate, Madison, New Jersey, May 2017. In with the good air. In with the good air, with the good earth, with the good self, with this remarkably good life, this gift of being alive, of being awake to the world around and inside, to all the goodness and lightness of this world, despite its sadness, darkness, to all the possibilities for living each day in states of greaterness, in states of gratefulness. Thank you again, friends, for leaning in here, for thinking and feeling in, for sharing this well-aerated time together. I'd welcome hearing your experience of this show through the ether, or of others you've heard here, and how you've enjoyed or appreciated them, been intrigued or inspired by them. I invite you to freely share this one out or the whole Floating Poetry playlist. If you valued this broadcast or others or all of them, I'd welcome any contribution you'd like to make as a thank you, whatever you feel the value is for you. This series is wholly listener-supported when donations come in to support it. Every gift helps me do the work I do to make and host these programs, to keep freshly engaging you. If you are making a gift, thank you so much. You can do that by Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal to the same email. Or you can simply mail a check to me to P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. Or contribute through the Donate tab at thepoetorialist.com. Is there any theme you'd like to see a future show on? Send me a note, Colin at thepoetisphere.com. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube, currently on the Floating Poetry playlist there, and ultimately, yes, on other leading platforms. The broadcasts come to you through the Poetisphere, the oasis of possibility that I'm guiding, which you can explore as a visitor or join as a subscriber. All are welcome. I encourage you to see what it's about and at least get a sense of our beautiful community of possibilitarians there, as well as the energies flowing. To make joining Even more attractive, I've made month and year-long subscriptions available through the early spring. So till May 20th of 2024, you can have a membership at just $114 a year instead of $190, or $14 monthly instead of $19. You'll see each code to use right on the site through the Join Us tab. thepoetisphere.com, P-O-E-T, the Poetisphere.com. You might enjoy a recently released interview that I gave with the soulgoddesslife.com group in the UK. You can find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The title is Embracing the Poetics of Life, a Journey into Aliveness. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in here soon again. Until then, dear listeners, celebrate our life-giving air, our vital atmosphere, and champion all the ways you can keep it clear, clean, and healthy. Honor the life force that flows from you through your breath as prana. Sense into the ether and its invisible energies. And set your mind now and again to all the ways we experience the air, the ways we use air to describe things, the way the air fills our bodies, senses, spirits, and imaginations, by itself and with all the elements like the rain and clouds and animals like the birds and butterflies, and a universe of scents and sounds, natural to man-made, our own voices in speech and song not least. Goodbye for now, good spirits, and stay sound of wind and limb.